The forest stood tall and silent, as if it had been breathing for hundreds of years without being noticed. Mara walked slowly between the trees, trying to remember how far she had come and where she had turned last. She had entered the forest in the morning, believing it would be a short walk before returning home. The path was clear at first, and the air felt light and friendly. Birds moved above her, and sunlight touched the ground through open leaves. Mara felt calm and free as she walked deeper, enjoying the quiet away from noise and people. She did not notice when the trail slowly changed and then disappeared. The ground became uneven and the trees grew closer together. By the time she realized the path was gone, the forest around her looked unfamiliar. Mara stopped and turned around, hoping to see a clear direction back. Every way looked the same, with tall trees, thick bushes, and shadows. She felt a tight feeling in her chest, but forced herself to stay calm. Fear would not help her think or move forward. She checked her phone, hoping for a signal, but saw nothing on the screen. The battery was low, and the silence around her felt heavier. Mara took a deep breath and decided to keep walking instead of standing still. She remembered that staying calm and moving carefully was important in nature. She followed a gentle slope, hoping it would lead to something familiar. Her steps were slow and careful as she watched the ground closely. Roots crossed her path, and fallen leaves made the earth slippery. Time passed slowly, and the light in the forest began to change. The sun moved lower, and shadows stretched across the ground. The air became cooler, and the forest felt older and quieter. Mara began to worry about the coming night. She knew staying outside in the dark would be risky. Her thoughts moved between hope and fear as she walked. She listened closely for water animals or any sign of life. The forest answered with silence. Just when she felt her energy fading, she noticed something unusual ahead. At first it looked like a dark shape hidden behind bushes. She moved closer, trying to understand what she was seeing. The shape had straight edges that did not belong to nature. Her heart beat faster as she stepped into a small clearing. There in front of her stood an old wagon cabin. It looked like a wooden wagon that had been turned into a tiny home. The wheels were half buried in the ground, as if the earth had slowly claimed them. The wood was dark with age and covered in moss. Vines wrapped around the sides as if holding it in place. Mara stood still, staring at the strange structure. She felt surprise and relief at the same time. She had not expected to find shelter in such a deep forest. She walked slowly around the wagon cabin, touching the wood gently. It felt strong and cold under her fingers. The roof was low and the window was dusty but still intact. The door was closed but did not look locked. Mara looked up at the sky through the trees and saw the light fading. She knew she had to make a choice quickly. Staying outside would leave her exposed to cold and darkness. After a moment of thought, she reached for the door. The door opened with a loud creak that echoed through the clearing. Mara stepped inside and paused as her eyes adjusted to the dim light. The air inside smelled dry and old, like wood kept safe for many years. Light slipped through small cracks in the walls, showing a simple space. There was a narrow bed placed carefully against one side. A thick blanket lay folded neatly on top. A wooden table stood near the wall with a chair beside it. Shelves held jars, tools, and old books covered in dust. Everything looked untouched, as if time had stopped inside the cabin. Mara felt a strange sense of calm as she stepped further in. The cabin felt safe and quiet despite its age. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment. Her breathing slowly returned to normal. She wondered who had lived here and why they had left. The care in the room showed someone had valued this place. Mara sat on the bed and rested her tired legs. She felt thankful for the shelter and warmth. She did not know it yet, but the wagon cabin held more than comfort. Something inside had been waiting silently for over 100 years. It had remained hidden through storm seasons and passing time. Now fate had brought Mara to its door. The forest outside remained quiet as night approached. Inside the cabin, a long-forgotten story was about to awaken. Mara sat quietly inside the wagon cabin, listening to the forest sounds slowly fade as night arrived. The light outside the small window turned from soft gold to deep gray and then almost black. She hugged her arms around herself, feeling tired but thankful to have found shelter. The cabin felt strange but not frightening, as if it respected silence and patience. Mara stood up and carefully explored the small space again. She touched the wooden table and felt marks made by hands long gone. Every object inside the cabin looked placed with care and purpose. She picked up one of the dusty books from the shelf and gently opened it. The pages were yellow and fragile, filled with careful handwriting. Mara could not read everything clearly, but she noticed dates written near the top. The dates were old, much older than she expected. She realized this cabin had been used more than 100 years ago. A quiet feeling passed through her as she slowly closed the book. She placed it back where she found it, showing respect. Mara then noticed a small wooden box under the table. It was plain with no marks or lock. She hesitated before touching it, feeling unsure. After a moment she knelt down and opened the box slowly. Inside were folded papers, a small cloth pouch, and a metal object wrapped in fabric. Her heart beat faster as curiosity grew. She opened the cloth pouch and found old coins worn smooth by time. They looked valuable, but more important, they felt personal. The folded papers were letters written carefully and neatly. Mara unfolded one letter and read slowly. It spoke of a journey through the forest and a family seeking safety. The writer described building the Wagon cabin as a temporary home. The words carried hope, worry, and determination. Mara felt connected to the unknown writer. She imagined a life filled with struggle and courage. As she read more letters, she learned the family never left the forest. The final letter ended suddenly without explanation. A cold feeling passed through her, but she stayed calm. She carefully folded the letters and returned them to the box. Mara wrapped the metal object again and placed everything back. She felt the cabin was not meant to be disturbed too much. The forest outside made soft sounds as night creatures moved. Mara lay down on the bed, using the blanket for warmth. The blanket smelled faintly of old fabric and wood. She stared at the ceiling, listening to her own breathing. Sleep came slowly but gently. Her dreams were filled with images of wagons, forests, and distant voices. She dreamed of people walking through trees carrying hope with them. When she woke up, morning light filtered through the window. Birds sang softly, and the forest felt alive again. Mara sat up, feeling rested and calm. She remembered where she was and smiled slightly. The cabin had protected her through the night. She stood up and stretched, feeling grateful. Before leaving, she looked around one last time. She wanted to remember every detail. Mara felt a strong sense that the cabin held an unfinished story. She stepped outside into the morning air. The forest looked different in daylight. Paths became clearer and shadows shorter. Mara noticed marks on trees that looked like old trail signs. She followed them carefully. After some time, she found a familiar hiking path. Relief filled her as she realized she was no longer lost. She returned home safely later that day. But the Wagon cabin stayed in her thoughts. Days passed and she could not forget what she had found. The letters and the silence stayed with her. Mara began researching old forest records and local history. She visited libraries and asked questions. She learned about settlers who vanished long ago. The Wagon cabin matched the stories. Mara realized she had found something important. She felt responsible for the truth hidden in the forest. She planned to return not alone but prepared. The forest had trusted her once. She knew it would reveal more when the time was right. Mara returned to the forest a week later, carrying a backpack filled with food, water, a flashlight, and a notebook. She walked with steady steps, following the same path she had found before. The forest welcomed her with familiar sounds and moving light. She felt less afraid this time and more curious. Her mind stayed focused on the Wagon cabin and the letters she had read. She reached the clearing by late afternoon and saw the cabin standing quietly. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt different to her. She stepped closer and placed her hand on the wood as if greeting an old friend. Mara entered the cabin and felt the same calm return. The air inside was still and gentle. She sat at the table and opened her notebook. She wanted to understand the people who once lived here. Mara carefully reread the letters she had copied earlier. She noticed small details she had missed before. The names mentioned were simple and hopeful. The words spoke of dreams, land, and safety. One letter mentioned a nearby stream and open ground. Mara decided to look for those places. She stepped outside and followed the direction described. After walking a short distance, she found a small stream flowing quietly. The water was clear and peaceful. Nearby she noticed flat land covered with grass. She imagined a family resting here long ago. Mara felt the weight of time around her. She returned to the cabin before sunset. Inside she noticed scratch marks on the floor near the wall. They looked like markings made intentionally. She moved a small rug and saw a loose wooden board. Her heart beat faster as she lifted it gently. Underneath was a hidden space holding a bundle wrapped in cloth. Mara hesitated, then slowly opened it. Inside was a small journal protected from moisture. The pages were worn but readable. The writing told a deeper story. It spoke of illness and harsh winters. It spoke of hope slowly fading but strength remaining. The final entry described hiding something important to protect it. Mara realized the cabin was more than shelter. It was a place of memory and care. She felt tears rise but stayed steady. She closed the journal and placed it back carefully. Mara knew the story deserved respect. As night approached, she lit her flashlight and prepared to stay again. The forest sounds grew louder then softer. She slept peacefully, dreaming of warm fires and kind faces. In the morning she packed her things. Before leaving she whispered a quiet promise. She would share the story with care and honesty. Mara returned home and continued her research. She spoke with historians and shared what she found. They confirmed the family had vanished during a harsh season. No one had known their full story until now. Mara felt proud and humbled. She planned to protect the cabin and its history. The forest had kept its secret for over a century. Now it had chosen her to remember. Mara returned to the forest for the final time in early autumn, carrying calm in her heart and purpose in her steps. The trees showed soft colors and the air felt gentle and clear. She walked the familiar path with care and respect. The forest no longer felt confusing or distant. It felt like a place that remembered her. When she reached the clearing, the wagon cabin stood quiet and steady. Sunlight touched the wood and made it glow softly. Mara paused and took a slow breath. She felt thankful for what the cabin had given her. She entered and stood still, letting the silence speak. The room felt full without being crowded. She looked at the bed, the table, and the shelves once more. Every item felt like a voice from the past. Mara opened her notebook and wrote carefully. She wrote about the family who built the cabin. She wrote about their journey and their strength. She wrote about how the forest protected their story. She made sure her words were honest and kind. After writing, she placed the notebook in her bag. She did not take anything else from the cabin. She believed some things should remain where they belong. Mara stepped outside and walked to the stream. The water moved quietly and reflected the sky. She imagined the family standing there long ago. She imagined their hope and effort. She felt a deep connection to their lives. Mara returned to the cabin and closed the door gently. She did not lock it. She wanted the forest to decide its future. As she walked away, she felt peace instead of sadness. Back in town, Mara shared the story through careful words. She worked with local leaders to protect the land. The forest was marked as a place of history and care. Visitors were guided with respect and limits. The wagon cabin remained hidden but safe. People learned about courage, patience, and memory. Mara often returned to the edge of the forest. She never entered without purpose. She felt changed by the experience. The story taught her to listen deeply. It taught her that time leaves messages for those who notice. Years passed, and the cabin remained standing. The forest continued to grow around it. Mara grew older and wiser. She carried the story wherever she went. The family who once lived there were not forgotten. Their hope lived on through quiet care. The forest remained silent but alive. The wagon cabin waited no longer. It had been found, understood, and honored.